And here's some news you won't hear anywhere else. High energy prices can cost lives. As I wrote in 2019 and again last year, Australians are dying because of high energy prices. That's not just my opinion, that's according to research conducted by doctors at the Alfred and academics from Monash University showing people who had been indoors presenting to hospitals with hypothermic emergency. The 2019 paper published in Internal Medicine Journal revealed that in just 2 inner-city emergency departments, more than 200 patients presented with hypothermia, with 23 people dying over a 7-year period. That's just 2 emergency departments in one city. And the stats show around 3/4 of these patients were pensioners. It's quite shameful, a first world country where people are too scared of high energy prices to properly heat their homes in winter. And now The Economist reports energy prices may have killed more Europeans last winter than COVID-19, with their modelling showing high energy prices claimed 68,000 lives. Joining me now is Liberal Senator Alex Antic. Alex, thanks for your time. These figures are shocking. People dying because they can't afford to put on the heating.
Yeah, Rita, they really are shocking, but not unpredictable, I think we could probably say. I mean, the likes of Professor Ian Plimer have been talking about this for a very, very long time, that we're actually at more risk of cooling and being freezing cold and, those sort of weather snaps than we are of, burning to a crisp, as the climate catastrophists will tell us. So it's not really surprising in a sense. It's tragic. And, once again, there are very real human costs that come as a result of disastrous green policies all across the world. I always find the tragic irony of what we see is the left, Labor and the Greens, push these policies here and in other countries around the world and in the EU and so forth. The very parties that are meant to stand for the working people, people who are on government pensions and the like, and yet these policies are the very things which are potentially driving people to an early grave. It's shameful, Rita.
Absolutely. And I'm going to talk about Chris Bowen's disastrous couple of days in a second. But first, on this issue, in the UK, it's been revealed the cost of net zero and the refits to households that are required aren't just going to be enormously expensive, it's simply unaffordable for so many. Citizen Advice is saying it will cost more than £15,000 per household, which, Alex, is just out of the reach of many people.
Yeah, and look, it's the same issue, really, isn't it, Rita? That this is really hitting the hip pockets of those who can least afford it. I mean, it's all very well if you're living in a mansion on the harbour in Sydney or somewhere like that, but most people are not doing that. Most people can't afford just to simply, whip out and put some solar panels on or whatever it may be, even though they may have to. This has come as the result of disastrous green energy policy for decades now, really turbocharged in the last decade. But we're now seeing the costs going up. I think there's a prediction that it'll be something like 39% increases in energy bills over the next 12-month period for Australians. Now, this comes on top of already high costs of living issues with high mortgages, enormous inflation rates. And this is all off the back of the Labor government promising $275 off each energy bill. I think they repeated that 96 times during the election campaign. We're not getting anything near that, and in fact the dial is going in the opposite direction. It's shameful. We live in a country where we are so blessed with energy and resources that we should be simply selling it to the rest of the world, using it ourselves, digging it up in the case of uranium and nuclear energy, storing it and then rolling around in $100 notes. It's a disgrace.
We should be. We should be taking advantage. And talking about nuclear, Climate Change Minister Chris Bowen has got himself into all sorts of trouble. He's been humbled on Twitter with a brutal fact check showing the post and video he shared on the website on nuclear energy was absolutely fake news. And I'm pretty sure Malcolm Turnbull spoke approvingly of this particular tweet of Chris Bowen's. And today in Canberra, Bowen was accused at a Senate hearing of getting his knowledge of nuclear power plants from The Simpsons, and he was also schooled by Dr. Adrian Patterson, who ran Australia's sole nuclear reactor at Lucas Heights for more than a decade. Here is just some of what he had to say about Bowen's nuclear video.
In fact, the yellow drum with the nuclear symbol on it is the Greenpeace meme, which is used to make people frightened of nuclear energy.
You might have got it from The Simpsons opening credits.
Absolutely. So I think I was gravely concerned by that, having been the CEO of ANSTO and briefly having him as my minister for a month and a half.
My condolence.
It was a deep, deep worry, not just about the fact that it maligns the very, very carefully trained and very committed workforce at ANSTO. And I think it should be very, very careful reflection should be given on it as to the deep damage that type of gamesmanship, which is maybe funny in very small circles in the Australian political setting, but it's not funny for us as a nation, and it's not funny for us standing in the world. The job of the Minister and all of us in this room, to be frank, is to think about that number and how quickly we can reduce it. Whichever of the three sides of politics you occupy, you can find a space for nuclear in Australia if you are prepared to take a rational, reasoned and careful look.
Alex, do you think Chris Bowen will listen to Dr. Patterson and reflect on his behaviour in this area?
Well, look, there's a strong message here for little Chris, and that is this: leave the social media to the professionals, OK? They leave it to me. We don't need people freelancing into the area of kind of droll social media comedy. It's not for the faint of heart, and you've got to leave it to the pros. But, I mean, this actually sums up the whole story about nuclear power. I mean, those sorts of demonisation tactics have been used forever and a day. Wherever you see nuclear power painted in Hollywood, it's always with a radiation suit and a gas mask. And that point being made about the yellow drum being a Greenpeace meme is just another example of that. We're not talking, not everything is Chernobyl, not everything is 3 Mile Island. These are old tech scenarios, and it is completely disingenuous to suggest that that is the future of modern small modular reactors. Let's get on with it.
Now, Alex, you were the subject of a piece in The Australian by our mate Pembo, who wrote, at the centre of these tensions, these are tensions between the moderates and the Conservatives, at the centre of these tensions is one of the most polarising figures in Australian Liberal politics, hardline Conservative Senator Alex Antic. He goes on to say how you are a reviled figure in moderate Liberal circles in SA, and that many were deeply unimpressed by your actions last year, withdrawing support for the Morrison government over vaccine mandates. What's your response to that piece? I would have thought you've been vindicated as far as the mandates go.
Yeah, look, I think myself and Senator Gerard Rennick certainly have been. I mean, I think the whole thing the point needed to be made, and we made it, and I don't regret that for a second, regardless of what so-called, faceless men say in the background, whatever. The reality is I made a promise to the Liberal Party members in South Australia to stand for our values regardless of thick and thin, and I've done that and I'll keep doing it. But, yeah, I mean, I always like reading that. It's almost like it is reading about someone else. Like I can't feel the horns growing out of my head, but presumably they're there. I don't know. Hardline Conservative. What does that mean? I mean, that's sort of, centre-right 10 years ago. So, look, I don't know what to make of that. They'll leave the commentariat to make their conversation. In the meantime, I'll just continue to stand for what we should stand for, and we'll forge on regardless.
Yes, I think hardline Conservative means basically you've got some principles and backbone, and apparently that's not allowed in the Liberal Party anymore. It causes all sorts of polarisation. Senator Alex Antic, thank you so much for joining me tonight.